Hello and welcome to another knitting episode from me. Delighted to finally be able to sit down and record. It's been a while. It's been maybe 6 or 7 weeks. I'm not even sure. But anyway, my name is Helle or Hella. I'm coming to you from Denmark. And I've apparently chosen the hottest day of the year to sit outside and record, or to record, which then meant I had to sit outside because my house is becoming really hot. Need I remind you that saunas are made of wood, i.e. they contain the heat. So it's already pretty hot inside. And right now I have the sun in my face because this is where this bench is. I have a little small hope that it's going to sort of dip behind the top of my house so I can cool down a little. If you haven't been here before, welcome. If you have been here before, welcome to you too. I'm so delighted that you decided to click on this video and spend a little time with me. There's quite a bit to catch up on, so let me just tell you what's on the program today. And I have my computer in front of me here, so that's why I sometimes look down. I have two FOs that you haven't seen before, nor as whips. I have one ongoing work in progress that you have seen before that I've made quite a bit of progress on. And then a dormant one that I'm not going to bring in today because I haven't made any significant progress on it. But then I also have two new works in progress that are also connected, of course, to, well, I say of course, that's not of course, but one of them is connected to some acquisitions. It's also a test knit, so you probably haven't seen much of the project either. Maybe a small hint of it on Instagram, if you're on Instagram. And then there's another acquisition that comes with a plan. So that's what I plan to discuss today, and I will no doubt digress many times, but there you go. I think I have chapters, so in case at one point I digress too much, you can always look down and see, do you want to skip this? Oh, and I also have a couple of clips from some yarn shops that I visited recently. One in Copenhagen, one in Florence in Italy, and one on Langeland in the town of Rudkøbing. I have a holiday home or summer cottage on Langeland, and I discovered this shop recently, much to my surprise, and I was delighted. So of course I did a little sort of subtle, I hope, paparazzi filming in a corner and tried to pretend that I was just looking at the yarn, which is what I always try to do, and it's always tricky to film in yarn shops. But I'll put those at the end for your delight, if you wish. And in connection with one of the yarn shops at any rate, I also just want to chat a little bit about a knitting friend I met up with from southern France, whom I met in Copenhagen in July. Also just want to say that it's very hot. I think already now it's like maybe 27 degrees and we're going to hit 30 degrees in about an hour. So I'm not going to be able to keep this on for much longer, I have to say. I like to start with a quote, as some of you know, and it can be sort of something to frame the session of today, or it can be something that I've thought about recently. In this case today, it's kind of both. And I think it stems from me having watched quite a few podcasts over the past few weeks when it was still summer holiday and knitting and things like that. And on the one hand, it gives you lots of inspiration and lots of cast on paralysis in my case, which I'll get back to. But also there's the danger of thinking that, oh my gosh, I'm not knitting enough, or I'm not doing a good enough job, or this podcaster does this, maybe I should do more of that since I also make knitting videos. So there's danger of comparison or fear of not enoughness. And that's what I just briefly want to address today, because I think a lot of us suffer from a feeling of not being enough from time to time. And also sometimes I get triggered by, this is me being a sensitive human being, I get triggered by certain comments, not necessarily on my podcast, but on other podcasts. Recently I watched one where the woman was introducing some kind of color, and there was a comment that said, "I love that you're bringing colors into your podcast. I hate seeing all those whites and beiges everywhere." And you know, you can just watch it all, and you don't have to hate any colors. Maybe they're not for you on that day, and that's completely okay. for my own part, I like both colors and neutrals, and I sort of change between them, just like I change between something complicated, something easy, something with textures, staccanet, color work, etc. So, you know, there's room for all of it, and let's try to remind ourselves and everybody else here of enoughness. So here's the quote: "You are enough, 1,000 times enough, and every time you doubt it, remember that you're not alone." And it's by a Canadian poet who goes by the name of Atticus, which is apparently a pseudonym, and nobody really knows who he is. Sort of like Banksy, the artist in the UK. And of course, on the surface of it, it's a simple quote. It's almost even banal. But so are many truths. And if you really allow yourself to sit down and think about it, there are some far-reaching consequences. Imagine if you could walk around thinking all the time, I am enough, you are enough, we are enough. So that's my little bit of poetic offering for the day. Okay, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to take this off already. Okay, so I'm like 7 minutes in, 5 minutes in, and I've already had to take off my finished object. But there you go, I'll talk a bit about it now. Just want to also mention that one of the reasons why it's taken me a while to have enough material, actually, and for that matter enough time to film again, was that I spent the first few weeks of July and the last week of June or something like that knitting a project that I can't share until December. So of course that took some weeks, and it's a winter sweater, I can say that much. So I'll show you that when December rolls around. So my first finished object now on a hanger is this very colorful rendition of the Aika by Megumi Shinagawa. If I just leave it like this, you can actually see the breeze catching it, which is perfect for this kind of floaty, ethereal garment. It's perhaps not as floaty as it would have been had I used the original yarn that I thought I would use for it, but more on that. I'll hold it up again in a little while when I begin to talk more about it in detail, and of course also add some clips where I'm wearing it. I first saw this when it came out in a Line magazine, and immediately knew that, immediately felt attracted to it. You don't always know that you're gonna cast something on because you're attracted to a million things, or I am anyway. But I really liked it. I really liked the look of it, and I have knitted a couple of lace garments before, and I really love them, especially if they can land in this sort of area between beautiful, simple, maybe even bordering on edgy, which I felt this one was, and maybe because it was by a Japanese designer, so it's not sort of flowery, lacy in that sense, but it's ethereal, I guess you could call it. And I had this yarn, I showed the Aika in my video where I talked about potential plans for the year, and I had thought at the time that I wanted to use this yarn, which is a lovely silk mohair by an indie dyer in Denmark called Ladybug Yarns. I've used some yarns by her before for my Out of My Dreams blouse, which is also a lace sweater, lace blouse, where I used 2 strands. And I bought this actually right after at the time because I really liked it, and I remember also feeling that because the collar is a little further down than, for instance, this one, I can wear it even though it's silk mohair, and I'm definitely sensitive to silk mohair. And I hadn't thought it through because this the Aika has a collar that goes further up. Here when I wore it, it goes higher up than here, so I hadn't actually thought it through. I just thought of the color and thought it would look beautiful, and I'm sure it still would. But I've become increasingly aware that I want to steer sometimes away from silk mohair, precisely because I'm both sensitive to it, I can't wear it directly on my skin, and I wanted this to be a garment that I could wear during the summer and just sort of throw it over, something like this, if it's not 30 degrees out. And by the way, I also want to remember to say that it's one strand. It's only one strand of Surrey alpaca, and I'll get back to the yarn. And you'll see later I also talk about I've gone sort of, for the test knit, I've chosen another yarn to avoid silk mohair. I'm not going to do that forever and ever, but for garments that I'd like to use during the summer or the warmer half of the year. And then I remembered that I also saw Carmen's version. I think she subscribes to the Line magazine. At the time, you couldn't buy the pattern separately, and I saw her version of it on her and Jackie's podcast, Knitting a Good Yarn. And Carmen wore this sort of beautiful purple version of it, and I went, I gasped. So already then, I think a little seed was planted that you don't necessarily have to make it in a very sort of neutral pastel-y look, although that would also be beautiful. But it was certainly planted. And then I had a visit from Petra from the Czech Republic, which I talked about in my last knitting video, and she gifted me some lovely yarn, 2 skeins of Surrey silk and 2 skeins of silk merino. Let me just and I don't actually know if you can buy yarn from her. I mentioned last time that she's called Traveling Needles on Instagram, so you'd have to contact her. I have no idea. But the label looks like this, and it's a lace weight, and it's 65% alpaca and 35% silk. And the 2 skeins, yeah, I wound them up on my ball winder machine thingy, and they began to sort of come apart during the knitting, so I wound them up just sort of old school like this. This is what I have left of these 2 skeins. So I ended up with this color, and let me just show you a little closer. You can see that it's 1 strand. I'm not normally somebody who would perhaps choose something this variegated and something this bold, I might also call it. But now that I was gifted it, I'm like, well, why not? Remembering Carmen's also quite bold version, I thought, yes, why don't I make this out of it? For one thing, it'll be soft on my skin. For another, it'll be a little different and something a little, I think it makes it a little more statement-like, maybe less ethereal, but I'm fine with that. I think I really love it. However, I also have a couple of things to say about it, and that's all to do with me, not the yarn, not the pattern. Just want to mention, or if I didn't say it before, that the pattern can now be bought separately. It couldn't when I made the plans for my year video, but now it can. And I wonder why you can buy some patterns separately afterwards that were published in the Line magazine and not others. Because there's a lace cardigan that I've seen on Ravelry a long time ago, and it was published in the Line magazine before the Aika, and it's still not available as a single pattern, so I'm not sure what that's about. I don't know what the rules are. Anyway, I really loved knitting this. I loved knitting lace again. I really enjoy knitting lace, and my garment weighs all of 65 grams, so it's definitely the lightest garment that I've made so far. The recommended needle is 6mm, and everybody here, or a lot of people on Ravelry, wrote that this flew off my needles. This was so fast. The minute something like that is written, I'm like, uh-oh. I'm always wary of that, because nothing, I think, has ever flown off my needles as far as I remember. I'm a slow knitter. I feel like I'm a slow knitter. If somebody from my last knitting video wrote, gosh, you're a knitting machine, I'm like, well, that's hours and hours. It's not due to a fast knitting technique or any magic. I didn't make a swatch. I thought, well, it's just a really open lace. I mean, how bad can it be? I'm just gonna start. So I started with the recommended needle for the collar and the rib on the sleeves, and the body is 5.5mm or US 9. And for the body, for the rest of the body, the majority of the lace work, it's a 6mm or US 10. So I thought, well, this is excellent. It's gonna go fast, and it's gonna be lovely. Wound up 1 skein, and I began happily. And you probably can't see a whole lot, but maybe here you can see. And it probably looks fine. But if you take a look at this, and this is just for me and my personal taste. Yeah, maybe I should actually pin this on my t-shirt now that it's no longer in danger of poking through some holes. I don't know if that works. Can I put it into my bra? Yeah. Okay. If you look at these holes, It's probably difficult to see here, but to me they look humongous. They looked really big. Um, and when I wore this bit, I think it was probably another round or two, but it has sort of unwound itself. I felt like it would sort of droop and become something, I was afraid that it was going to look like something somebody had knitted with their fingers in the 70s, if you catch my drift, and just be really huge and gapey and not more structured. So I was hemming and hawing about that. I wrote to Carmen, "What did you do?" And Carmen is in the middle of moving, so she sent me a photo of hers, and I don't think she sized down in needles. And I don't know if it's because of my yarn or if it's just because I was too overly sensitive to the look of it. But what I did was I um, decided not to unravel immediately, but to try again, which is what I did with this one. And what I also realized once I'd knitted the neckline for this one was that there was a difference in the two skeins. So the neckline here, it's not a huge difference, but there's a difference. If I'd continued with this and suddenly run out and continued with the other skein, there would definitely have been a noticeable difference. So if you look at the neckline here, or the color, and you can't really tell here, but this is definitely lighter. So after the neckline here, I started alternating skeins. So in the end, it was a good thing that I started over. And what I then did was I sized down, not just one needle size, but two. So I've knitted this on a 5 millimeter, or US 8, I guess. And I've knitted the collar on the 5 millimeter, not on a one size smaller, which the pattern suggests, which most patterns suggest, because I didn't want it too tight. And I actually cast on with a size even larger just to make sure that this one wouldn't be too tight, because I could feel when I tried this on that it was slightly snug, the cast on edge. I could definitely get my head through it, but I didn't want it to be too snug. And I only went down needle size to 4.5 millimeter, or 7 US 7 for the ribbing on the body and the hem, having first tried with the 5 and it flared a little. Um, and here it almost looks as if it is the same needle because it goes straight down, and that's what I was going for. Okay, so considering that the pattern suggests 5.5, 5.5 and 6 millimeter, I of course began to think about why mine was so loose. And of course it's because obviously now it's because I'm using one strand of lace, whereas the pattern I think suggests fingering, and that's going to make a huge difference. And of course also alpaca is stretchy, whereas a merino is probably a little more structured and won't droop or gape as much. So there's that. And then I went looking through some people's comments, and I saw somebody else who had knitted using lace weight, and she said she also had to size down considerably. And I think the reason why I was hesitant when it came to sizing down is that I never do that. If anything, I size up usually. So that was a new experience. And of course, it just goes to show you really need to consider, how does your yarn behave, and what's the difference between the yarn you ultimately choose compared to what the designer has chosen and what other people have chosen. So lesson learned, and that lesson isn't over. Before I get any further into other lessons learned, let me just talk briefly about the pattern. You start with the cast on edge, then you knit your way down. Maybe I should actually show it on the real garment. There's a kind of spiral. I'm not sure if you can see it here. You can probably see it better on the hem. There's like a spiral in the ribbing. If you have a solid color, I imagine you will be able to see it better. So that's a neat detail. Then there's quite a few short rows. First there's a bit of short rows, and then you do a little bit of lace. Then there are short rows again. Then you do some lace, and every time the lace section is followed by some stockinette rows. And those stockinette rows usually in the beginning include some short rows so that the back becomes a little longer. And let me see. Yeah, it's easy. It's a really well-written pattern. There you have the charts for the first bit, and then you have the charts for the sleeves. You have the charts for this bit down here. I found absolutely no issues with the pattern. Let me just check the sizing. The pattern is available in English, Finnish, and Japanese, and has 9 sizes. It specifies neck circumference, chest circumference, yoke depth, upper arm circumference, and length. And I didn't read through a lot of those because I had to change some things, which I'll get back to. But the chest circumference, which I'll just mention briefly, ranges from 40 inches to 74 inches, or in centimeters from 100 centimeters to 188 centimeters. And that includes recommended ease of 6 to 12 inches or 15 to 30 centimeters of positive ease. Mine is on the shorter side of that, not intentionally. The pattern recommends that you place stitch markers between the pattern repeats, and I definitely did that, and it was definitely worthwhile because I could always read my knitting and I always knew I was on track. And for lace, I've always found that you really want that. It's a little more maybe unclear in this one. I'll see if I can throw in some clips where I'm wearing something white underneath, where it'll probably be a bit clearer what the pattern is. But it's just really helpful for you as a knitter, I find, to use those markers instead of just hoping for the best, because I hope for the best in other cases and it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. Okay, one of the problems was that since I used a smaller needle, I didn't get row gauge, and I didn't think so much about it because what I just thought was I'll just make extra pattern repeats as I go along, which I often do, or make, knit extra centimeters because I often don't meet row gauge. And I did that here too. I think I actually knitted at least 2 extra pattern repeats on the body and 2 or 3 extra on the sleeves to get length. And that's no problem because I tried it on and on and on as I went to make sure, do I have the length? And I also, as I almost always do, blocked it like 2/3 of the way through to make sure that I had the length I wanted, and to make sure that I didn't sort of make the ribbing and then it would droop and stretch 5 more centimeters, which I've tried once and will never do again. So that you can check out, do I actually need to make more before I make the hem? So that was nice. But what I also did was I stretched it quite intensely, quite aggressively when I did that block, because of course, going down 2 needle sizes, you're no longer on the size that you started out with. And I didn't think about that at all because I didn't measure my gauge. I just looked at the size of the holes, frankly. What do I like? Does it look like the kind of lace I appreciate? Yes, it does. Now I'm on track. And then I didn't think about the size. So I was going for a size 2, and I think I've ended up with somewhere between a size 2 and a size 1. Maybe it is a size 2. I've actually not measured. I will and put that on Ravelry. But I probably should have gone for a size 3, maybe even size 4, and get a slightly more oversized look. That's what I was actually kind of going for. But maybe I wasn't really. I'd seen a version of it in size 4 that looked really good on this woman. She's one of my icons on Instagram. I might pop in a picture of her version. She knitted a size 4, and she's I think smaller than me, definitely more petite than me, and it looked brilliant on her, but I don't think it would have looked so brilliant on me. So I decided not to do it too oversized. However, I wanted it maybe slightly more oversized than this. But I have to say, again, the magic of blocking, I pulled it out, I yanked it out and put all the little pins in, and it stretched at least, I would say, at least 5 centimeters, maybe more. So that's like maybe 6 centimeters, which is, I don't know how many inches is that, 2.5 inches or something like that. So definitely worthwhile. And also I didn't have enough depth when I had to separate the body and the sleeves, so I also made more stockinette rounds, which the pattern also suggests, and maybe I did another pattern repeat. And as I said, I tried it on several times, tried to see, could I reach under my arms and grab the back part from the front, and if not, should I continue? And as I said, I alternated these 2 skeins. You can't see it here because the difference is so slight when you see it here, I think. Although you may be able to see this sort of dark blue. There were definitely more of those in one skein than in the other. This one was slightly more, leaning more light purple. This one maybe a little darker blue. So I alternated skeins and that went fine. Sometimes I don't bother about that, but here I felt it would be best to do that. I wonder also now whether it's because I use Suri alpaca or silk Suri that it grew more than it would have done had it been silk mohair. So, you know, there's that. That's also quite nice. It was interesting to knit with just one strand. I've seen people do that for the ranunculus, and it wasn't perhaps the best knitting experience ever. On the other hand, it was doable. It wasn't something that I would be afraid of, and now I certainly am not. And I like the light look of it, and for me it means that you don't necessarily just have to have camisoles or tees as summer garments. This for me can also be a summer garment when it's not exactly 30 degrees, but you know, something light to throw on. Or at any rate a transitional piece, which I'm all about the transitional pieces. Those are the ones I definitely need more of. And it's also something I can then wear inside, which I also need more of. Or I don't need more of. I have enough, apropos the quote, but I need fewer of the really heavy, really warm garments. When I joined at the underarm, I already had a suspicion that it was going to be a little snug, so I added extra stitches to begin with. And for the sleeves, I tried them on when I'd knitted about this much, and I felt it was definitely too tight, so I ripped back and I added more stitches under the arms so that I could have one more pattern repeat. And that made a difference because I don't like snug sleeves, and I wanted it to be flowy and not tight. And let me just show it like this, and I've probably already shown you clips of me wearing it. Did you notice a difference in the sleeves? I mean, from one sleeve to the other. Because I knitted, as I said, the body and the sleeves on a 5mm, except for the last sleeve. We were going down to the summer cottage on Langeland, and I, in a rush, packed my stuff and hadn't noticed that I think because the last thing I'd done was knit the ribbing on the first sleeve, which was on a 4.5mm needle, or US 7. I hadn't noticed that I still had that needle on the cable, on the circular needle. So that's the one I packed and started knitting the second sleeve when I was down there. And in fact, I knitted the whole sleeve on that. So basically, one sleeve is knitted with a 5mm needle, the other with a 4.5mm. Okay, just put my hair up. It's becoming really hot here. And this, by the way, is after one of the Julys with the most rainfall ever. But anyway, apropos blocking and the magic of blocking, the potential magic of blocking, what I did was when I blocked them, I blocked only the sleeves afterwards because I'd already blocked the body, except for the hem. I didn't bother to block that, it looks fine. And then I soaked both sleeves, and then when I put them on the mats, I sort of laid them on top of each other, folded it sideways, measured them, and then had the slightly narrower sleeve on top, and then pinned them both out with the pins so they could sort of, you know, follow each other like silhouettes, to make sure that they had pretty much the same width. And I think I more or less succeeded. I can see that the one sleeve is slightly wider than the other, but there was no way I was going to rip that out and knit it again with a 5mm. I mean, it's just 0.5 millimeter. What's the big deal? And that's also related to something later. I mean, I have a gauge thing apparently these days, but I'm not, you know, not that into perfection. You know, you will never win if that's what you aim for. And I figure this is fine. It looks fine. The only person who would ever notice, I think, would be a keen knitter. So maybe there's one of you out there who's been going, there's a difference between her sleeves. And I applaud you if you have. I'm fine with it. Right, so that's that for my first finished object. The Aika, which I can highly recommend. Clear pattern, joy to knit, fun to knit, and maybe you'll be one of those people who can whip it up in a week because you actually meet gauge and stay with the recommended needle. I forgot to mention the gauge of the Aika. It's 12 stitches per 10 centimeters. I forget the rows, but I didn't meet row gauge, but 12 stitches is a good gauge. It should be something that you could work up quickly. And it's not like this it took me less than 2 weeks, so that's still quickly, but that doesn't mean I didn't spend a lot of hours on it, because I did. And others were like, woo, I whipped this up in a week. So I was one of the slower ones. So let me get to my next finished object, and it's one that you haven't seen before, as I mentioned, and it's the City Top by Tori Yu, which is a little camisole, and I just want to show you some of the details. I'll throw in some clips where I'm wearing it instead of changing right now, but I'll show you some of the details. There's this twisted rib all the way down the sides here, a small ribbed hem, small ribbing up here, and it's like a kind of a halter neck but camisole, like kind of a combination. And as you can see, this is very drapey. And I also want to show you, or I also want to talk about why I knit this top. But first, let me tell you that it's a fingering weight gauge. The gauge is 24 stitches and 32 rows. There are 9 different sizes, with the finished bust circumference ranging from 28 inches to 60 inches, or 71 centimeters to 152.5 centimeters. And she recommends negative ease of 4 inches to 0, or 10 centimeters to 0. And the reason why I decided to knit this top, even though I don't typically wear knitted tank tops, and this is also something I'm going to style with a shirt over, almost for sure, of which I might have already inserted pictures of or clips of. But the reason why is that one of my aims for this year is definitely to use up more stash. And I had some leftover silk, mulberry silk from A Knitter's World from last summer, where I knitted the ample tee, which was a really beautiful yarn to knit with. I knitted that holding it double, and here I had a little over 1 skein left. I had 110 grams left, which amounted to about 440 meters. So I basically just went on Ravelry and asked, if you will, you know, what can I knit with this amount of fingering weight yarn, or light fingering weight yarn? And I knew that it was only going to get me a summer top. There were a couple of bralettes that were also suggested, but I'm not going to get much use out of something like that, I don't think. Oh, I'd also used the gifted yarn from Petra, which was lovely. But the previous 3 projects, the 3 off-white or cream projects that I talked about in my last video, I'd all bought new yarn for, so I felt a distinct need to de-stash and use some of the yarn that I already had. And I also wanted to bring something with me to Italy for my vacation that was light and not full of wool and heavy and big. So I thought I had this sort of one and little extra ball of this beautiful blush pink yarn left over from that top. So I went and searched, typed in, I have this many meters and this weight, what can I knit from it? And it suggested a number of different patterns, and I really liked the simplicity of this. There's like a clean look to it, and there's still a bit of detail, and I really liked that. And some of the other ones I was tempted towards, I didn't have quite enough yarn. I might be, if I made it sort of broader or wider with wider straps up here, it might have been too short. And this is cutting it very close. I'll show you how much yarn I have left. This much, basically. It weighs 108 grams, so I guess this is 2 grams plus, maybe 1.5 grams plus the ends that I cut off when I sort of finished it and wove ends in. And this is, I've actually made it quite a bit longer than what she suggests in the pattern. You can see from the pictures that hopefully I've inserted that hers is much more cropped, but I'm not really into cropped tanks or cropped anything. Even if I have something high-waisted on, I like to be able to pull it down. Yeah, okay, so let me mention the other details. I used a 3mm needle, or US 2.5, which is definitely on the smaller side. It's a summer project, so it's typical. I did actually want to use maybe a larger needle, and also maybe go for a slightly larger size. This is quite snug, but I was afraid I wouldn't have yarn for it. And I also liked the fabric when I made a little swatch. I felt that if I went up a needle size to make it easier and to make it maybe slightly bigger, the fabric might become slightly sheer, and I didn't want that. So what I did was I cast on and made the neckline, the increases, and I actually screwed up a little. First, you're supposed to do one kind of increase, then the other, and I accidentally switched them around. But I mean, you know, it's fine. I think it's just the rate of increases that was different, but it still works. It still fits. Um, it sits kind of high up on your neck, and I didn't realize that until I'd made this length. She's like, don't make sure not to make them too long and make sure they don't stretch. So I was really careful not to do that until I realized what the construction was, and I could have just made them a little longer because then I wouldn't have needed to add the extra length at the bottom, but I didn't really think about that. And also, of course, had I done that, then maybe the armhole would have been further down, and you got to be careful about that. This is slightly snug, I have to say, but I have the feeling that it stretches over time. I haven't worn it all that much because it's been a little too hot, and I will typically wear this when it's not so hot with a shirt over. So what I was saying was I made sure to do the complicated bit before we left, all the increases and having to look at charts and make little notes, how far am I, that sort of thing, so that I was able to knit in the round when we got to Italy. And I felt like I was knitting this thing on the round forever. I mean, I'm knitting on the train, I'm knitting in the hotel room, I'm knitting on the plane, I'm just knitting and knitting and knitting, and I'm like, trying it on, I'm like, I'm still only here. How is this possible? But there you go, when it's fingering and a 3mm, and I'm a tight knitter. As I said, I don't meet row gauge, so it probably takes me twice as long to knit something like this or anything than normal people or most other people. Okay, I've cooled down a little for a moment anyway. But it was still, it was really nice to knit on. It felt, it felt like I was making the most of a train ride, that sort of thing, not having to engage in any sort of complexities pattern wise. And I could still look out the window, I could still sort of just sit and knit, talk with my family, that sort of thing. So that was really nice. And it being silk, it wasn't too hot. And also, can I just say, some of you may have seen the amplitude from last year, but what I think is interesting about this is that it has a slight fuzz. It's very, very soft. It's very soft. I mean, this is, of course, it's silk, it's next to skin soft, so it's really nice for somebody like me who's sensitive. I think this is called Cherry Blossom, the color. And Knitter's World is an indie dyer in Denmark, and she has a lot of yarns for people with sensitive skin, so I really would like to try more from her as well again. I'm really glad to have been able to use this. And unlike the Knitting for Olive Barrette silk, this one is more shiny. Not super shiny, but definitely more shiny. The Knitting for Olive silk that I used in my couture top 2 years ago is, to me, more like cotton. Still lovely, but you just got to know that there's a difference between the different types of silks. Okay, something about the construction. It's top down, and you start off with a provisional cast on, and there's a video link for it, and I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. I went searching for another link and ended up using the provisional cast on that Knitting for Olive does. And I think I've done that one before, so it made sense to me faster. And one thing, even though I like the pattern, it's clear, there were just too many times where I cut the yarn in the beginning. Like cut the yarn, then attach something, cut the yarn, break the yarn, break the yarn, break the yarn, break the yarn. I'm like, surely there would have been an easier way. I seem to recall a similar construction for the couture top, and there was not that many sort of cases of having to break the yarn. So there were some places where I felt this would have been neater had it just been continued. You know, like I think you place the original stitches on the needle, then you break the yarn, then later you cast on stitches for the straps Why don't you just instead knit across, then cast on, then knit back across, cast on, and then close those stitches, which means you've already cast them on. They're in continuation of the stitches, the live stitches. I didn't understand that. I think that's what I've done before with other similar constructions. So to me, I didn't quite see why you had to cut the yarn that many times, but I'm sure I'm probably overlooking something. I'm not the designer, so I just found it a shame that there were so many ends to weave in that made it look a little less neat here and there, and something so delicate. I also want to say the yarn, you can see the drape here is really lovely. I don't get as much drape as you would think when you look at this, because of course it fits pretty tightly to my body. Somewhere around here I do, but it meant that the yarn was very slippery, and I had to sort of tie it around both my index finger and a pinky finger in order for it not to sort of glide off my fingers. Yeah, so different yarns, different experiences. And also what I experienced, which I've also experienced before, it's not as bad once I blocked it, but there is a difference in gauge for me when I knit flat and then when I begin to knit in the round. And I've tried that before. And the only thing that would have made it slightly better here would have been if I changed the needle to a 2.5 millimeter. And for one thing, I don't even have that. For another, there's no way I was going to knit this much with my row gauge on a 2.5 millimeter. Plus, I figured I would be able to block my way out of it, and I think I pretty much have. I'd forgotten about it until I read my notes, so clearly not that bothered about it. One of the things that was tricky for me was binding off, probably because of the yarn. It was slippery, and the first time I did it, it was too tight. It didn't look right. I tried to bind off in pattern that she tells you to, and I decided, no, that doesn't work. Maybe I should try an Italian bind off, so I started sewing that. I had tried this much, and it didn't look right, and it felt a little too wonky. So in the end, I ripped that out. I think I'd actually bound off most of it, and I went up a needle size and bound that off, and just tried to... Did I also do a version of Jenny's stretchy bind off, surprisingly stretchy bind off? I don't remember. I remember actually, now that I mention it, I did that here. I did Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, because otherwise this cobwebby thread would have been way too tight. So just something to think about. But I always try it on as I go, and I really take a look at what does my fabric look like, and I try it on. If it feels completely tight compared to the rest of the fabric, you have to undo it. All right, I think that's what I have to say about the City Top by Tori Yu. I've now tried 2 new designers that I hadn't tried before, and that's also definitely one of my goals for the year, to try new designers. Some of the other projects I have are by designers I've already knitted things by, so I like to mix it. It's fun to see other ways of writing patterns, and to try other constructions, and just basically other garments and other aesthetics. I really enjoy that. It's become a little overcast now, so it's a little more temperate out here. I find myself being able to breathe a little easier. Let me move on to my works in progress now. I have 2 sort of lingering / dormant works in progress. One is the obsidian, but I have not made significant progress on that. It's simply too hot. It's DK weight, and it's like double DK weight because it's color work, so it's super heavy in my lap. The few times I have tried to knit a round or 2, I've been like, whew, that's 1 round, leave it aside for tomorrow. So I've accepted that that's a project that will be slightly postponed, maybe until like mid-September or October, definitely for autumn, and that's fine. I'm looking forward to it. The other project that I made some progress on is because I had finished the Aika, and I'd finished the City Top, and then I had swatched for a test knit, and the swatch was drying, and it took quite a while to dry, and it has also had to soak for 24 hours, so that was like almost 2 days. And then I had some time to knit on the Aurelia pullover, and this has been a bit of a saga, and I'm not going to go into it heavily today because it's still not finished, but there's quite, I would say, significant progress on it. However, I've run into a problem. Let me just show you how far I am now. So there have been many stages of this where I've involved everybody. Should I or should I not frog? And what am I going to do now? I haven't met Rogate, etc. This is the Aurelia pullover by Sari Nordland. I'm using, let me just remember what it's called. Merino DK by La Bien-Aimée in the colorway Amy's Flashy Lipstick, which is this lovely tonal yarn that is a mix between red and pink. So definitely slightly out of my colory comfort zone. And yet, you know, I do step into these bolder colors every now and then, even though I perhaps mainly gravitate toward more muted colors. Um, but here it is, and look at that. We have begun the sleeves. That in itself is like, woo! But as you can see, not a whole lot of sleeve done. I mean, this is like a little past my elbow, and this is how much yarn I have left. I'm not sure that this is enough, and here's the problem. I went online to search La Bien-Aimé's website the other day, thinking, well, let me get another skein so I know I have enough for the cuffs. I don't want bracelet length, and I certainly don't want, you know, 3/4 length. And now I'm going to have to probably accept that that may be the only option, because they no longer have this colorway on this base. What's up with that? I, I, I don't understand why. So this has been by far the project that's taken me the longest, even longer than the Fox Thoughts pullover, because I mean that was essentially stockinette, just with a lot of detailed color work, but not with a whole lot of issues or problems or conundrums. Um, I did I wet blocked the body to figure out how much length that I need. I have the width, I have the fit, I have the length of the body that I like, but of course I don't even have the length of the sleeve that I want. I did wet block them, tried to stretch them a little, but it wasn't enough. It maybe stretched a centimeter and a half, not more. So yeah, I could maybe try to go online and see if anybody has this to destash. I don't probably even need a whole skein. I mean, maybe only need like not even half, but I will definitely need some. This is not enough. I haven't weighed this, but I've knitted on both sleeves with this from the inside and the outside. So this is actually, it's not even as much yarn as it looks like, because it's not plump, or it's plump. The yarn is plump, but it's not dense. You don't have a whole lot of yarn in there because I've pulled from the inside as well. So that's where I am with the Aurelia. A lot of progress, which began when I started knitting on it for 40 minutes every Tuesday, also spurred on by a viewer and Casey from Young Folk Knits. So suddenly I was on a roll, and then this happened. So, you know, there's not a whole lot of smooth sailing in a lot of my knits, I have to say. I don't know why that is, but hopefully a solution will appear magically here, and I will keep you posted. I have to say that once I'd finished knitting on the Aika, grabbing DK weight yarn was like, whoa, this is like knitting with a rope or something. It felt huge in my hands, and it just, even though it had previously felt like it took forever to knit around, and it still did, I was on the sleeves, and it was not so much Sleeve Island as gratification that they didn't take as long as all those cables and bobbles on the body. So I felt it went faster. So there's that. When those sleeves were drying, which also took a while because I'd soaked this DK weight yarn quite substantially, I was waiting for it to dry, and I was waiting for this swatch to dry. And I'd been watching all these podcasts, as I mentioned. I was just beginning to sort of, I don't know what happened. There's one of these diseases on in the knitting community called cast-on-itis, when people sort of become like, oh my gosh, let me just cast on all the things. I want to talk about cast-on paralysis. I don't know if there's such a thing, or if you've felt inflicted with this, but I watched some episodes of various podcasts, and there's like, ooh, that, and that's for sure. I want to knit that, and then next day I saw something on Ravelry, or saw another podcast, or just had an idea out of the blue. It's like, no, that's what I want. For sure, that's what I want. Then I went stash diving, and what did I have, and blah blah blah. I didn't really have any yarns for any of those. And then I saw something else I liked, so I was feeling the overwhelm. You could perhaps also call it that, cast on overwhelm. But in this case, it did result in a kind of paralysis where I had a swatch drying, I had a sweater drying, and I didn't know what to do with my hands. The obsidian was too hot, and I was just going, what does a person do? So I basically found myself with a day or two of endless possibilities. And there was no way I was just going to let those days pass by without knitting a little. And I just want to briefly run through some of the patterns that caught my eye. I've not cast on any of them, can I just say right away, but had I had yarn for them in my stash, I probably would have cast on one of them. But that's what ultimately kept me from casting them on, because I was like, no, I gotta be good. I gotta be resilient and adamant not to buy new yarn. I really want to use up some of the yarn I have in my stash. And one of the problems is I don't have, well, I do have some sweater quantities, but I also have lots of leftovers or single skeins. And they invite somewhat more of a color work project. And I would like to do more color work projects. I mean, complex color works where you have several colors. But that's not for just now, 30 degrees. At least I couldn't get worked up about that. And I was just really more motivated to make a dent in my stash than to buy new yarn. So one of the sweaters or t-shirts that I really thought I was going to cast on was the Paul Klee. And the reason is that I really just want one or two more colors for the yoke. And I was at a yarn shop recently where I thought I could use one of them, but I hadn't brought the colors that I've already put together for it with me. So I think it is a matter of time before I cast that one on, because I really love the summer version of it. That's the Paul Klee by Midori Hirose, and I was gifted the pattern by Helena, which was very kind. And I'd already seen it in this version, which just looked really beautiful to me. So I still have that on my mind, but by the time I get the yarn, it will probably be autumn here. So I don't know if that's going to be a project I will cast on this year, maybe next spring. The other projects I felt very inspired to cast on had I had the yarn. One of them is a new blouse by Johanna Garish, or Colibri by Johanna. And it's called the Electrine blouse, and it's just beautiful. I watched her video where she talked about this, and what I love is basically the sleeves. The sleeves completely caught my eye, even a photo of just the bottom of the sleeves. Not only because there's lace, but because there's like in Danish we'd call them a trumpet sleeve. What are they called in English? Bell sleeves? Perhaps, but they have these wide dramatic sleeves, and it looks really beautiful. I was already in a sort of another paralysis. What color would I choose? What color? You know, would I go for a pastel? Would it be too cute since there's also the lace? How about black then to make it more dramatic? But you wouldn't be able to see the lace with the black. What then? You know, just going through all sorts of thoughts on that. And I decided, let me just put that on hold. And then there's a viewer who wrote to me that she had seen a pattern that I'd actually also incidentally seen. And she said, this reminds me of you. Have you seen it? And it's called Breath Blouse. I might have suspected it to be called Breathe Blouse because it looks sort of flowy, but it's Breath by Gudrun Fessel, who I was already following on Instagram. I didn't know she designed patterns. But funnily enough, when I then the following week watched a new episode from Knit Together with Kim and Jana. Jana had just had she cast it on, or was she planning to cast it on? I forget. But somebody had written to tell her it reminded them of her too. I was like, well, that's interesting. I'm wondering if it's the same person. And if you take a look at the Breath blouse, it has a really sort of flowy, simple shape, but also these elegant, wide, slightly dramatic sleeves, but not overly dramatic because it's just the only lace is sort of these simple lines down the body, I imagine, where you make increases. And then the final sweater that I've been tempted by for a very long time, I think I saw a mint colored version of it at one point, and I also saw Jonna make this. So it's the Woodlark sweater by Line Holme Samsø. and it's just beautiful. It has the same dramatic, not the same, but similar dramatic wide sleeves, and I just really love that. I do recall John is saying that you couldn't just sort of look away and watch TV while making it, so I'm a little hesitant about that. But I've only knitted mittens by Line Holme Samsø, or as most international viewers call her, Li Knit or Linnet. But Li, I think, is a short abbreviation for her name, Line. And by the way, it's not her in the model photos. Somebody said that in a video I saw yesterday, and it's not. It's not her in the model photos. The earlier photos from her is actually Caroline from Aika Knit, who modeled her earlier knits. So those are some sweaters with sleeves, certain sleeves that I've really been looking into. And at one point I would like to make one of them. And then the last thing that I've been thinking about, I should probably save this for a sort of one of my favorite things, or things that bring me delight after I have 2 whips to go. But I just want to mention now that I'm talking about what you might call dream knitting, and it's incidentally also by somebody that Jonna mentioned in her last video, and it's a pattern that I just saw pop up on Ravelry recently. It's just come out. And it's called Oh My Kaftan by Anna from previously Pickles in Norway, and I think she's called Anarchiv, which is also similar to Anarchy. And this kaftan, it blows my mind. It's so cool and ethereal, and I don't know, I haven't seen anything like it, and I think it's just gorgeous. It's knitted with I don't even know what yarn, because it's not like I'm about to cast it on, but it's also knitted with sequins, and that's really interesting. I don't know if I'd be able to wear that, if they would be scratchy, or if I'm ever going to knit something like this, because you kind of begin to imagine your own fantasy self walking along some kind of I don't know, a beach or woodlands or somewhere mythical and imaginary, wearing this kind of garment. Certainly not doing the groceries or going to work or something in this garment. So there is that. But sometimes you also want to knit for your fantasy self. You really do. I often do. Let me get back to what I'm actually working on now. Suddenly, at the spur of the moment, I thought, right, this is what I'm going to make, and I'm going to try to use up this yarn that I bought over 3 years ago. And I have 7 balls of this Drops Air, which I've never used yet. And I know people say that it has a tendency to pill and whatnot, but I've had it sitting in my stash for so long, there's no way I'm not going to try to use it. Then I can also share my experience with it. This, by the way, is color 33, which is like a muted grayish blush pink. One of my favorite colors, I think. Blush pink, which is almost not pink. So really pretty. And I've been suggesting to myself certain patterns, and I think I also mentioned it in my yearly planning video, the ideas I had for it. And one of the plans I had for it, or one of the ideas I had for it, was the Celine sweater by inhibit. And then suddenly I decided, no, actually I wanted the Super Celine. And I didn't have a contrast color. So I went at the spur of the moment, I sort of virtually ran from my room, threw myself into my car, drove out to this yarn shop that's a little further away from me, where they sell Drops yarn, and took one of the skeins that they have out there of this color and sort of matched it towards the other skeins lying on the shelves, because I'd already looked at some of the yarn that I have, dark charcoal gray Purolana, which to me was too dark, and then I also looked at leftover brushed alpaca from Sentinus in a very, very white, snowy white, and I felt that was too low contrast and you wouldn't be able to see it. And I thought I'd really like a gray that's somewhere in the middle between those two. So that's what I bought. As I said, this is number 33, and this, I believe, is color 4. So it's like a kind of medium gray, and I've not gotten very far. It's a bit of a stretch to call it a whip. It's basically a cast on. But I have cast on only just yesterday, and or the day before yesterday, I think. I'm already running into some gauge issues. The Super Celine, let me just pull it up. It's apparently an Aran weight gauge, 18 stitches over 20 and 22 rows. And the suggested needles are 5 millimeter for the collar and cuffs and hem, I imagine, and the rest 5.5 millimeter. That would correspond to 5.5 is a US 9, 5 is a US 8. And I've knitted quite a few patterns by intermezzo, and I think I've always gone up what is 0.5 millimeter size, which means I would go up from a 5 to a 5.5. And I did that. So I did that for the neck here, and then I just continued with the 5.5 down here, even though she suggests to go up a needle size from the collar to the color work. But I'm not sure if I knit more tightly in the color work, because I tend to stretch it a lot. However, I feel this yarn is different. I think I knit more tightly here than, for instance, I did with the Fox Thoughts pullover, where I knit it more loosely. And this is, of course, a blown yarn, so the yarns behave differently, even though I feel that I knit the same, but I probably don't. So I've knitted these first rows, as you can see here, on this 5.5 millimeter needle. And usually it's a no-no to knit with the same size as the collar. It will flop a little, perhaps, and it looks a little floppy here. But that's because I knitted the Sun sweater by Aika in winter. And that has a similar kind of collar. And I felt that it was maybe a little, it wasn't tight, but then I'd seen another version of it in another size where it was wider, and I really liked that. It became more of a funnel neck rather than a mock turtleneck, and I really like funnel necks. The problem here is, of course, this yarn is so soft it's not going to stand up. And also I haven't added the strand of silk mohair that the pattern calls for, because I've tried to avoid silk mohair. I certainly wouldn't want it up near my throat, and also I didn't have it in my stash, and I wanted to just buy as little as possible to mainly use from my stash. And by the way, when I bought this 3 years ago, it was on sale for only 27 kroner, which is about 3.6 euros or $4.3. So that was ridiculously cheap per skein. And then the one I bought yesterday or the other day was only still only costs 40 kroner, which is about 5.5 euros or $6.3. So this is a very inexpensive project. So even if it's not a sort of complete success, I think that's fine. If I love it and if it's not too time consuming, I might be tempted to knit it again using another yarn. Let's see how this behaves. I'm really curious to see how Drops Air behaves and how much it pills. You know, you can only try and see what happens. Also, can I just say, when I was in that yarn store, it's full of Drops yarns and full of Sandnes yarns and also some I think Yadigan, which I've never tried, and Permin and a couple of other brands maybe. And I had to almost blindfold myself, just walk with a straight face over to the shelf where I knew the Drops Air was, and just ignore all the other yarns. But there was no way I could. Near the entrance there was these shelves with line, and I discovered, oh, that's a pretty mauve color line. Could I add another one of the ones in my Paul Clay? And then I turned a corner and there were the Sunday yarns. I'm like, oh, that icy blue. So I was just like, you know, getting all overwhelmed again. But I browsed, but didn't buy anything apart from this skein, which I needed. And I searched on Ravelry, and I could see that the people who had also used Drops Air for this pattern had used only one skein for the contrast color. So I felt fairly confident that that's as much as I need, I hope. And I'm not even sure why I decided to knit the Super Celine instead of the Celine, because I already have the pattern for the Celine when I bought a magazine 2 years ago that had an intermezzo on the cover. They had this extra little leaflet with knitting patterns. Her Celine sweater on the cover, and the pattern inside was the reason I bought the magazine. And it's also, I think, the only pattern that I would feel tempted to knit from this magazine. But I might knit this at some other point, but using other yarn. I felt this one, to me, the Super Celine invited the use of the Drops Air just a little more, maybe. Maybe it was because it reminded me a little of the Sun sweater where I used Puno, so that blown yarn gives a little more of a oversized look. And this one is slightly less oversized. I really like the black and white in the original Super Celine, but these were the colors that I had. and I like the not too high contrast look, and I really like these two colors. They're two of my favorite colors, I would say, in general. Let me just say that the pattern comes in 5 sizes, ranging from a bust circumference of 112 centimeters to 148. It doesn't say how much that is in inches, but a very popular pattern I can see, and I think it's also going fast. Oh, what I also wanted to add was that now that I'm down here, to me it seems as if my little initial triangle here is not quite big enough, or I feel the pattern is maybe just slightly dense. And as I said, I've knitted with 5.5 here, so I'm tempted to go up to a 6 just now before I continue on with the color work. I've done that before. I think I've seen other people who do that, and it's not a major thing, but that would also enable me to get the droop of the shoulders, sorry, with the color work down on my arms, and I really like that look. All right, so that's as far as I've gotten with the Super Celine by intermezzo, and of course I'll keep you posted. I hope that it's going to be a quick and gratifying knit, but who knows, things might turn up that I'm not yet aware of. Crossing my fingers. Okay, my last work in progress is barely a work in progress as well. It's just a cast on. I'll show you the swatch. Very tiny swatch. This is typical me. I can't be bothered to make a whole long swatch because I'm probably not going to meet row gauge anyway. And this is the one that had to soak for 24 hours and then dry for a long time. And it's a swatch for a new design by Caroline from Aika, and I think the pattern right now is called volare, which I think means, does it mean to fly? I think it means to fly in Latin, maybe Italian, and that's because of the wingspan of this blouse, volare blouse, and it's this blousy sweater with dolman sleeves that are picked up. So let me show you. I've not gotten very far, and so far it's super simple, super easy, but still one of her sort of trademark unusual constructions. So I've cast on, I think, I don't even remember if this is the back or the front, but use this supposed to knit like a whole square. So I'm just going to be knitting down here, back and forth, knitting flat, and at some point, I haven't read through the whole pattern. It's a little confusing, and I imagine that's because I read it through without actually following along. So I want to make sure that I don't read too far ahead so that I can actually just do what it tells me when I get to that part. But then you, from this edge, you then pick up the sleeves so that they move outwards, so that you knit this way first and then you knit that way. And the idea behind knitting it that way is that you can get a lot of volume into these sleeves and achieve these dolman sleeves, which is really interesting. Hence the volare, that I think she was first going for something with wings or feather or something. Also because her sample is knitted in an off-white using Isa Bomolin and Isa silk mohair, which makes it very sort of fluffy. And I'm not going for that, since I'm on a small quest apparently this summer to try to avoid silk mohair. So while the testers are using different versions or different colors of that yarn combination, Bomolin plus silk mohair from Isa, I opted for another combo that Caroline suggested. We were talking about me participating in this test knit, but I'm like, I'd really love to try out the Bomolin, but the other garments I have that have silk mohair, I can't wear them in the summer because I can't wear them directly on my skin, or either they feel scratchy when I'm too hot, or I become too hot because they're too warm for me, in which case they will also become scratchy. So it's just no. So I was in Copenhagen, which I'll get back to, but I was in Copenhagen to meet up with Nina from southern France. And right before we were supposed to meet up, I get a text from Caroline saying, actually, another ideal yarn combination would be Hørsilke and cashmere lace from Copenhagen, which I used last summer for the Soul Blouse by Aika or Caroline. And as luck would have it, I had about 20 minutes before meeting up with Nina, so I just sort of sprinted toward the yarn shop called Ulsted. I forget if it's just one woman or two women, two sisters who own it, but they also own Copenhagen. So I knew they carried it. So I marched over there on a hot Copenhagen day, by the way, and got hold of this yarn instead. So this is sponsored, and that's yeah, a privilege for many Danish test knitters, I have to say. But of course they're also shown. But I really appreciate getting this yarn. Otherwise I probably wouldn't have taken part in the test knit. I was thinking of bomulin plus something else, but even if it had been alpaca 1 or 2 from Isa, it would have been too hot for me in the summer. So without further ado, let me show you the yarn combination that I've opted for. The bottom one is hørsilke from, as I said, Copenhagen. The top one is cashmere lace. And as I said, I made the Soul Blast last summer, which gave me this very blousy garment that I've worn quite a lot if it wasn't too hot in the summer here. It's my go-to summer blouse, and I don't have many of those since a lot of them are just too warm. So this is a mix between 30% Tussa silk and 70% French linen. And I'd first looked at the colors from Bomulin and the other one, and I was tempted by lots of different colors. But then again, I'm like, well, if I want something that I'm going to be able to use quite a lot to throw over lots of different things, no matter what color I'm wearing, I'd like something a little more neutral, frankly, or just calm. And also I just knitted this, which was definitely sort of bold, and been knitting on this. So I like to switch it up a little. So I chose this, I would say it's like a champagne colored yarn, kind of. And then pairing it with a slightly lighter cashmere lace, but you can't see that it's lighter once you look at the fabric. I asked both one of the owners of Ulsted and Nina, what do you think? And they both suggested this one rather than a more beige cashmere lace. And I'm glad I went with their suggestions, because I thought it would have been a little more dreary if I'd chosen the more beige. So this is, to me, like a kind of a champagne color. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how this one knits up. Let's see, what else can I say about it? It's still being tested, so I can't say a whole lot about it. I mean, we're further along in the testing process by the time you watch this, because editing always takes me days, and I have a couple of events coming up these next few days, which means it's going to take me probably even further or even longer. So I'll be further along, and the test pattern will be further along, but I think the pattern will be out in a few weeks. But it has a 22 to 23 stitch gauge, and since I'm using different yarn, I didn't quite get gauge, meaning that I was actually almost on like 21, 22 stitches, which means I would have to go down a needle size, but I wasn't going to do that, because then it would take me longer to knit. I would be on a 3mm. I couldn't be bothered to do that again, and also the fabric would be too dense. This is what I like. Using this combination, I used the 4.5 for the Soul Blast last summer, and I thought, surely I shouldn't go down to a 3. And also I was already in doubt whether to choose size 1 or size 2, so I thought if this becomes a little bigger, then probably I can go for size 1, then hopefully I'll be safe. So that's what I've done, and that's what I'm doing so far. I don't have a whole lot more to say about it, since the pattern has some blanks still, things like circumference, because that's difficult to measure with these dolman sleeves, and length also, and yarn estimate, amount of yarn, things like that. They haven't been decided completely yet, so I'll get back to you on that hopefully in the next podcast. Let me just show you, apropos that, this is just neither here nor there, but apropos the purple / cobalt blue color of the Aika and the dolman sleeves or batwing sleeves. Here, I promise not to laugh or judge. I'm just showing you a photo of me taken in the 1980s. There's a couple, but if you take a look at these, look at the sleeve that I'm wearing in that blue, actually the black too for that matter. I'm wearing a dolman sleeve sweater in a cobalt blue. Gosh, so there's a blast from the past. So I feel that I'm kind of revisiting my former self here, and I think that's fun. So these were portraits taken of me in the States when I lived there in the 80s. Oh my God. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that just for the fun of it. Let's just see, what else have I got here? Yeah, the final plan that I have, this is not a plan, this was a finished object in my last knitting episode, but when my youngest daughter saw it, she's like, what is that? Where's that from? I'm like, well, I made it. She's like, can you make me one? And I'm like, sure. So I showed her the different colors that you can get in Teddy Deer, which is also by Copenhagen. And she decided on this color that I have in here, and I'm gonna knit her the smaller version of the Teddy Clutch by Petite Knit. I shared the details in my last knitting video where everything was pretty cream. She has not chosen a cream, she's chosen this bubblegum color. It's, I think, actually called bubblegum on their website. It's also color 420. So if you want the smaller version, you can get away with just the one skein. So that's going to be on my needles soon, and then I will just have to get hold of the frame, because you get the frames and the lining. Not sure if I'm going to get the lining here. It made sense to buy the lining because it's the same color, cream color, but I would almost feel tempted to buy some fabric for her and sew the lining in a color that matches this, or maybe with a fun print. I'll have to ask her. Let's see. And then I just want to share a little about my outing to meet Nina and when I went to Ulsted, the yarn shop in Copenhagen, because Nina has a YouTube channel also called Nina Polly. I will link to it in the show notes below the video, where she shares knitting and her life in southern France. She's originally from Scotland, but also half Norwegian, so I love that mix. And she is a watercolor artist and shares I would say her videos like lifestyle, interspersed with some watercolor painting and some knitting, and really lovely videos. So I would really recommend that you go check her out. And we'd written together for, I don't know, maybe a year, just on off every now and then, and also on off sometimes with Jackie and Carmen. And her brother lives in Copenhagen, so she wrote to tell me, would you by any chance be in Copenhagen on that date in July? And I don't actually live in Copenhagen, and I don't go there that often, but we'd been writing together for a while, and we'd actually been thinking about me going to France. So I thought, well, I think, yeah, I'll go to Copenhagen to see you. And she gave me this watercolor print, which I just want to show you because you can buy them in her Etsy shop. Isn't that beautiful? And it's very sort of apropos. Maybe you can't see them, but they're hydrangea behind me here. And I really love this. This is like a muted lilac colors. And Nina knits a lot in very sort of pastel light colors, which I often like to do as well, or sometimes anyway. So it was just lovely meeting Nina, and we hung out for I think 4 hours. We started out with a breakfast at this cafe in Copenhagen. I'll put in a little picture of us. We met up in Ulsted. I felt I took up so much space, both sort of space and sound space, if you will, in Ulsted, because we met in there, literally. We're sort of texting, I'll meet you in Ulsted in 5 minutes. And then later we went to Sommerfuglen, which is another yarn shop in Copenhagen. That's where I had the wherewithal to actually film a little bit. I did not have that in Ulsted, because I'll get back to that. Other things happened as well. But later we walked around Copenhagen, and we sat down and had a lovely glass of, was it rosé or was it white wine? I forget. I think it was rosé. It'll be in a photo I think I took. So just had a really lovely time. And it's funny when you sometimes hit it off with people who are from a completely different part of the world. You've met through knitting, and it's just completely uncomplicated and easy to talk. So that was just absolutely lovely. While I was in Ulsted, I also met 2 other viewers, one of whom was from Australia, and it was so lovely to meet you. I think you were there with your daughter, and I'm wondering if you bought some yarn. I'd be very interested to know. And the other was somebody I recognized. I'm like, I recognize you. She said, yeah, I have a YouTube channel as well. And I'm like, yeah, I've watched you. And now I can't for the life of me remember her YouTube name. So maybe somebody can help me out. She said she was from Minneapolis. If you're there watching, would you please say hello? Because I want to find you again and watch more of your videos. This is the problem sometimes. If I don't remember to subscribe to somebody, which I often don't, I watch, a video by this person, then a video by this person. And I get overwhelmed if I subscribe to like 50. So I try to keep it minimal, which means I sometimes forget what people were called, and that's not good. But anyway, it was so lovely meeting you as well. So there's me being all, ooh, hi, and these people working and standing behind the counter like, who is this person? What's going on? It was just, it was a bit of a moment. So, but it was all good. I swear to God, I felt so happy and delightful afterwards. There's just something about meeting people who are watching in real life. It just makes it real, and it felt really gratifying to meet you in real life. And I just felt I was really positive and upbeat for the rest of that day. So thanks so much, and I'm so glad you came up and said hi and didn't sort of just give me the eye that I've sometimes felt from certain Danish knitters, like they'll give me the eye, but I don't know what that means. Probably they give me the eye because they don't have a clue who I am. They're going, what's she wearing, or what's she gonna knit? Finally, let me add the clips from those 3 yarn shops that I've visited. I might do a little voiceover and explain something. I might just add some music. I'm not sure. Sorry about the rather abrupt transition there. This is the yarn shop in Florence that I visited when I went there in July. It was a little different than I had assumed, and I ended up not buying anything there. I didn't really have the opportunity to really touch the yarns up close, or most of them anyway, because it seemed that many of them were on shelves behind a counter and wrapped in plastic bags, unlike the yarn shops I'm used to visiting. And it also seemed as if people arrived with projects in mind, walked up to a counter, and then spoke to the guy who was standing there. I don't know if he was a knitter. It was just a different kind of yarn shop experience from what I'm used to. I didn't really know any of the brands and felt a little unsure. Should I buy something just for the sake of it? And I ended up concluding that no. But it was interesting to see. This is Sommerfuglen in Copenhagen. Those top shelves are Knitting for Olive, and I think the lower shelves are Sandnesgarn. So lots of beautiful yarns. There's Nina. And again, I'm always in doubt what to film. Here are some samples. I walked pretty fast past them. Other yarns, silk mohairs, various Danish brands. That's Gepardgarn, Hørsilke, linen silk. Some other Danish brands and some La Bien-Aimée there. Notions and things like that. Filkalana down there. Isager. And behind there you can see Ito yarns. A lovely yarn shop that I'd like to definitely visit again when I go, but I didn't buy anything in that one either. This is the one in Rudkøbing on Langeland, which is just a mix of all kinds of yarn, and it's spread everywhere. There's your traditional Isager, which exists in any yarn shop in Denmark, I think. Lots of other yarns all over the place. I almost didn't know where to look. Next time I'll be better prepared. And they had lots of samples that I recognized. Knitting for Olive, Petite Knit, Knitting for Olive again. One or two that I didn't recognize. Anne Wenzel. And my favorite things, knitwear. And a Petite Knit again. So all the samples that you'd expect in a Danish yarn shop. And some tempting yarns outside. I found one ball of fluffy yarn that looked pretty tempting in a sort of brown blue color, but again I ended up buying nothing. And then I also just briefly want to mention what I've watched during my last many hours of knitting. If you couldn't care less about that, I completely hear you. Sometimes I'm like, no, I just want to hear about the knitting. So if you don't, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And if you want to tell me what you're knitting on, I'd be really interested to hear, because that's also a way of communicating, that it's not just me talking in a one-way direction. But let me just, for those of you who want to hear what I've been watching, and I mean, that's just, it's neither here nor there, but it's just, you know, you spend so many hours sitting there that sometimes you'd like just something else to keep you company. So I binge watched Vera from one end to the other, and it was also something that some of you suggested after I'd watched Shetland. It still doesn't beat Shetland, I have to say, but that's because I really love Jimmy Perez. Whereas Vera, I think I have a kind of love-hate relationship with her. Towards the end, I was like, when she retired, I felt really sort of sad and nostalgic almost. But she could sometimes get on my nerves. In the beginning, it was actually partly her voice, which is squeaky and mouse-like. But then after a while, I got used to that. But really love seeing the landscape in northern England as well. And, you know, you just gotta love a good crime series, an English crime series. However, one of the things that to me they don't get right is that they don't give us enough backstory about the human beings in the show. For instance, who is Kenny? When do we ever get to know anything about Kenny? We've never even seen the inside of his house. Okay, so there's some backstory about Vera, of course, and there was also some when her first assistant was there. I forget his name, but then when the second assistant arrived, he was just like there. We never really knew much about him. A little bit, but we never saw the inside of his house or, you know, his girlfriend. Yeah, I think maybe much later there's a little bit of that, and it was fine, you know, but really we don't care who committed the murder. We want to know about the people, which is why I loved the second series a lot that I saw, which is called Happy Valley. What was it called in Danish? Blind Spor, and I believe it was on BritBox. That's really good. The woman who plays the main police officer, the main role, first I really liked her, then she started to annoy me, and then I liked her again. So I think there's this love-hate relationship with all these detectives. Apparently they have to be a little weird, I think, but really good acting. I mean, my gosh. It takes place in Yorkshire, and you get a lot of the background information for these people, and I really enjoyed that, because it's the human aspect that I'm drawn to. I think the murder is just what propels us forward in the action and the plot. Lots of really good acting there. Her sister is played by the actress who plays O'Brien in Downton Abbey, and it's such a different role for her, and she's also really excellent. And there's actually also somebody else there who, did he have a role on Downton Abbey? I think, maybe. But anyway, a really excellent show that I can highly recommend. And then for the past week, when I began these more recent projects, I've watched Wednesday, season 2, and I'm not super impressed so far. I like the aesthetic, I like the goth universe, but I'm not, the plot is a little contrived, the acting not super convincing to me. Maybe I'm just an old cynic, but I'm still going to watch the second half of this new season when it comes out in September. That's so annoying when they do that, you know, split them in half. Anyway, if you have other shows that you can recommend, by all means share them. I mean, of course we all have different tastes, but I might give it a try. And maybe you don't watch crime series at all, so you're like, no thanks, and that's fine too. But at any rate, thank you so much for coming along with me today and allowing me to chat about my knitting to you. If you have any questions or comments, by all means share them in the comments so that we can have this ongoing conversation. I don't always leave long replies because I tend to easily get overwhelmed, but I so appreciate your comments, and I read them, of course, and delight in them and feel that that's part of our connecting here. I love that. So goodbye from me, and take care.